Now, to begin today's video, we actually do pick up with Steve Rogers right now having a bad dream. And the reason why he's having a bad dream is because he is remembering everything that he had forgotten thanks to Doctor Strange. Remember, if we jump back to the very beginning of our coverage of Johnathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, we had learned that Steve Rogers was part of the Illuminati, alongside with Doctor Strange, Mr. Fantastic, Iron Man, Black Panther, Black Bolt, and the Beast. They had reformed because Black Panther had found out about the incursions, two Earths about to crash into one another, and when they do, both their universes die with those two Earths. And Black Panther saw another Earth about to crash into the main Marvel Universe Earth. And so Black Panther had reformed the Illuminati to help him figure out how to save their Earth. And of course, they had used the Infinity Gems. Now, Steve Rogers was the one to use the gems to push that other Earth back into its own universe. The problem is, though, after he did that, every single gem broke, except the Time Stone. The Time Stone did not break. It just disappeared, and we never learned what happened to it. But with all that being said, Steve Rogers realized the rest of the group were about to go down a dark path, meaning that they were okay with blowing up another Earth to save their own Earth, meaning that killing billions of people. Now, Steve Rogers, he's a Boy Scout. He hates that idea. He feels like there is always a way to save the day without people dying. There's always a way to do something right without people getting killed. And of course, the rest of the group said, no, Steve Rogers, and that is why you can no longer be part of the Illuminati. And so Doctor Strange had made him forget everything about the incursions and the Illuminati so that they can continue to work on figuring out how to save the multiverse. Now, with all that being said, let's also not forget that Iron Man, aka Tony Stark, had made Avengers World Program, a program that he let Steve Rogers control to keep Steve Rogers busy. Because if Steve Rogers is busy, then there's no way he could possibly remember everything about the Illuminati and the incursions. The problem is, though, he has now remembered, and so he's very angry. And so right now, he wants to talk to Tony Stark. Now, we do see Steve Rogers go find Black Widow and Hawkeye, and he tells them that there is a traitor in their group. And you have Black Widow and Hawkeye kind of like, what do you mean we have a traitor in our group? Like, who's betraying us right now? What's going on? And so you have Steve Rogers walk away. They follow him. And then by the time we see them again, they also now have Thor and Hyperion with them as well at the front door of Tony Stark's home. And you're kind of like, okay, Steve, you have to tell them what you know. And he says Tony Stark is a traitor. And then he has Thor break down the door. And you have Tony Stark kind of like, hey, Steve, hey, everybody, what's going on? Like, my door was open. You could have just opened it. You had to break it down like that. That cost some money, you know. And that is the moment you have Steve Rogers telling Tony Stark that he remembers everything about the Illuminati and the incursions, that he remembers everything. And so that is the moment you have Steve Rogers explain everything to the rest of the Avengers, because they have no idea what in the world is going on. Steve Rogers only said, Tony Stark is a traitor. Come with me. We need to go get him. And that is it. And so you have Steve Rogers say that Tony Stark has reformed the Illuminati. And with him doing that, they believe that they have the final say in what the Earth is going to do. And so with that being said, they have been going to different universes and basically blowing up parallel Earths to ours to save our Earth. Now, Steve Rogers is okay with them saving their Earth. What he has a problem with, though, is that people are being killed in the process of saving the Earth. And so, to Steve Rogers, right now, the Illuminati are just as bad as the people they locked up. And so, it's Steve Rogers saying, what you're doing is wrong. Now, there is something Steve Rogers does not know. The Illuminati have not blown up an Earth yet. They almost had, but they had other people do it for them. The Black Priests, the map makers, and the list goes on and on. And so technically right now, the Illuminati are still innocent in a way. Yes, they did reform, but they have not killed anyone just yet. But it's still Steve Rogers saying, you have kept secrets from me and the rest of us, when you know this is just as big for everyone as it is for you. So you should have told us and we should have worked together. But once again, you have kept secrets and you're going around blowing up other Earths. And so right now, it's Steve Rogers kind of trying to arrest Tony Stark. The problem is, though, they're inside Tony Stark's home. In his home, he has built a lot of different Iron Man armors, and he's able to have them fight for him without him being inside of them. And so right now, it's an army of Iron Man robots fighting against the Avengers in this room. And they're trying their best to stop everything. They're trying to stop the Iron Man armors so that they can go ahead and arrest Tony Stark for being a traitor. But here comes the big problem, though. Remember what I said at the very beginning of our video, when Steve Rogers had used the Infinity Gems as a way to push one Earth away from the main Marvel Universe Earth, every single stone or gem was destroyed, except one, the Time Stone. It had just disappeared. But here comes the Time Stone right now. It reappears right in front of Captain America. And that is the moment we come to find out that they have been teleported 50 years into the future. Every single person who was in that room, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Thor, Hyperion, Starbrand, they all have been teleported 48 years into the future. And this right here is going to begin the long timeline adventure for the Avengers right now. Now, we do jump into the second chapter of this storyline, and when we do see that the Iron Man armors that were fighting against the Avengers had also teleported with the Avengers as well into the future. But with that being said, right now you have the Avengers being able to take out these other Iron Man's armor, just leaving Iron Man in his one armor that he's currently wearing at the moment. But with that being said, that is the moment you have everyone realize that they are 48 years into the future and technology has grown. It has gotten better. Matter of fact, there are now people who are living on the moon, which is very huge to say. But then you have Tony Stark point out one thing. He said, listen, if this is the future, that means what I did with the Illuminati must have worked. We had saved our Earth and the timeline was saved. Our future was saved because this future cannot exist if we have basically failed. And so look, we have basically won. You were wrong, Steve Rogers. You were wrong. But that is the moment they're confronted by someone else. And that is the moment they are confronted by the future Avengers, meaning that there are Avengers in the future. It's just that there are newer versions of characters we know and love. And so with that being said, they're still confronted by one member who's still an Avenger, even though it has been 48 years. And that person is Hawkeye. Hawkeye is still an Avenger, and he appears. And when he appears, he says, listen, I remember this moment because my past self is right there. But let me explain what is going to happen to you. In a few minutes, the Time Stone is going to reappear. And it'll keep doing that over and over again. It's going to take you deeper and deeper into the future. Now, with that being said, though, I was told to tell you, Steve Rogers, by your past future self, you need to make sure you're prepared for your future adventures in this timeline traveling you're going to do, because you're going to meet enemies on the way. So you need to be ready for anything as you go through the timeline. But with that being said, you didn't have future Clint Barton tell Steve Rogers something very important, but he just whispers it in the ear of Steve Rogers, meaning that no one else can hear what he had said. But then you have Hawkeye actually attack Tony Stark. And the reason why, because apparently after this storyline, Tony Stark does end up killing people, and Hawkeye was very angry about that. And so you have future Hawkeye just beating down on present day Tony Stark. And the reason why? Because people had died by the hands of Tony Stark. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. And it's Hawkeye saying, you're going to kill people, but you can stop that if you stop doing what you're doing. But the problem is you're not going to stop. You're not going to stop, and people are going to die. And when those people die, their blood is on your hands. And so this is me beating you up to basically tell you what you're doing is wrong. And then you have Hawkeye being able to break a device that will send Tony Stark back into the past, which is what he wanted to do. And the reason why is because the Time Stone has reappeared. Now, with the Time Stone reappearing, it means that the Avengers are about to travel even farther into the future. Now, not Iron Man, because he was just sent back into the past, but the rest of the Avengers are about to be sent even farther into the future. Now, you do have Steve Rogers asking future Hawkeye, what is going to happen next? Where is our next stop going to be in the timeline? And you have future Hawkeye say, I can't tell you. But the reason why I can't tell you is because this is as far as I got it. Meaning that after the Avengers had arrived at this point in the timeline, Hawkeye did not go with the rest of the Avengers as they travel farther into the timeline. And the big question is, why not? What happened to Hawkeye after this stop right here in the timeline travel? What happened to Hawkeye? And we're going to learn about that in the next chapter. And so getting into the third chapter of the storyline, we actually do pick up with the Avengers right now in temporal space. Basically right now, they're in nothingness, just pure white nothingness. But that is the moment you have Hawkeye fall away from the Avengers. And that is why you had future Hawkeye earlier say that he did not make it that far in the timeline travels. Because at this point right here, that was his last stop. That Hawkeye did not die, he was just sent back into the present day, where the Avengers had left at Tony Stark's home. And so now the rest of the Avengers will continue on with their travel deeper and deeper into the future. But then we see the Avengers arriving 422 years into the future. Yes, you heard that correct. 422 years into the future. Now, if you take that and add 48 years from the earlier time travel adventure, that means right now the Avengers are 500 years into the future from the present day. But with that being said, you have Starbrand point out that right now they're stuck in some kind of cube, that apparently the people in this time knew that the Avengers would appear at this exact moment in time in this exact location. And so they put a cube around here to basically trap the Avengers. With that being said though, that is the moment they are confronted actually by the future version of themselves in this timeline. Yes, an even more futuristic Avengers. Now, this version of the Avengers are not as nice as the Avengers we just met a moment ago with future Hawkeye. That this version of the Avengers, they're very strict. And matter of fact, they're upset that our Avengers from the present day had basically broke some kind of law. And so with that being said, they're kind of like, listen, we know the Time Stone is going to reappear in the next 15 minutes. But before you guys are able to leave, we need to talk to you guys about something. But we don't need all you guys. We only need 2 of you guys, Steve Rogers and Black Widow. And so with that, they gas the cube, and the gas is able to knock out Steve Rogers and Black Widow, but not Thor, not Starbrand, and Hyperion, because those 3 characters do not need to breathe, meaning that they can withstand the gas so easily. But Steve Rogers, Black Widow, they need air, and so they were knocked out by the gas. But of course, this future version of the Avengers, they wanted that. They want to have a conversation with Steve Rogers and Black Widow. And so they're going to, because they just teleported those 2 characters away just like that. Now, some time has passed by, and we actually do pick up with Steve Rogers right now waking up, bound to a chair, but being confronted by a future version of him, a future Captain America. Now, with that being said, you do have this future Captain America kind of give us some details about the future. What I mean is that he said that one day he just woke up and he was assigned this job. He was assigned to be Captain America. Now you're left to believe like, okay, so that means that in the future, humans wake up, they get a job, and that's their job for the rest of their lives. But in reality, this guy is not a human being. Matter of fact, this guy is a machine. He's a machine. And so basically, when the lights came on for him, his batteries were put in, whatever, he was assigned the role to be Captain America, because in the future it seems like machines have taken over the human race. And so he says, listen, before the time stone can take you away, we got to put something in your body to help us out in the future. Now, getting back over to Thor, Hyperion, and also Starbrand, remember, they were left behind inside that cube that is basically like a prison. But either way, you do have Thor talk to his future self, because in the future, it seems like Thor is more like a slave, that he's working alongside with the machines. But you do have future Thor tell past Thor, at this point in time, machines do rule over humans. And at this point, there's only like millions of humans left. Not billions, but millions. Meaning that millions have died and millions have moved on to different places in the universe. But right now, Earth is more machine than man. And that right there is very huge to say. But then you have future Thor tell past Thor, sooner or later, you are going to lose your hammer. You sooner or later will no longer be worthy. And that right there is kind of like a hint towards Jane Foster becoming the next Thor. Now remember, Black Widow was also taken away, but she was taken away by future Black Widow. But you do have future Black Widow basically giving our Black Widow some very important information. Like first, she tells her that, listen, right now in the past, the present day, your guys' time is always conflicting what happens at this moment in time, meaning that your actions in the past can change our future, and it's always conflicting what happens over here, because right now at this moment in time, machines have ruled over the earth. Humans are almost gone. The problem is though, your actions in the past can change that, where humans are actually still here on Earth and they still rule over the earth. And so she says, we're trying to change the past to ensure our future. But at the same time, we're trying to change our future to ensure we still have control over the earth. Now, you do have Black Widow of the future tell our present day Black Widow, listen, when you go back to your present day, back in the past again, you're going to see Tony Stark in his cell. But when you do, you need to tell him something very important. And so that right there is future Black Widow telling our Black Widow that sooner or later, Tony Stark is going to be in a prison cell. But he needs to hear some very important information. And the thing is, we do not learn what she wants to tell Tony Stark at this moment. We learn in a later video. But getting back over to our Captain America, who's right now being worked on by future Captain America, we come to find out what he was doing to our Captain America, our Steve Rogers. The future Captain America was putting a bomb inside of our Steve Rogers' eye. And he says that bomb is going to help us ensure our future. And right before he is able to explain, the time stone reappears once again, and it takes Steve Rogers farther into the future, and the rest of the Avengers as well. Now, just like Hawkeye earlier, who couldn't travel farther into the future, now it's Thor and Hyperion who can no longer travel farther into the future. So now it's just Steve Rogers, Black Widow, and Starbrand who get the chance to travel farther into the future, while Thor and Hyperion are now sent back into the present day. Now, Black Widow, Captain America, and also Starbrand, they have now traveled 5,000 years into the future. But with that being said, it's kind of like, okay, so what happened at this point in time to the humans, to machines? What happened? Because now we're 5,000 years into the future. Did everything change? Did machines rule over completely? Did humans die off? Did humans come back? What happened here? And right now, they're just standing in the middle of a garden. But that is the moment they are confronted by Franklin Richards. Now, that right there is very huge to say, because Franklin Richards should not be here because it's 5,000 years into the future. He should be dead and gone. But the thing is, with Franklin Richards, he is so powerful, so powerful, and able to control reality that it's possible for him to be here 5,000 years into the future. Now, Black Widow does not believe it's him, but then he tells her story when one time she had to basically babysit him, and how she taught him what toys could possibly be a weapon to protect him if any harm comes his way. And that is the moment he realized, that is the moment she realized, yeah, that's Franklin Richards. And somehow he's still alive. But before he's able to explain everything about this point in time, he tells the Avengers, well, really just Black Widow, Steve Rogers, and Starbrand, that they are leaving. And that is the moment we come to find out that this garden is an actual ship as well, and they're traveling through space. Now, you do have Franklin Richards basically show the Avengers what had happened to the human race and machines. That humans have evolved so much that they no longer stay on Earth. That they live all over the universe now, in different places, planets that we thought originally no life could live on. But of course, humans found a way to live off those planets and to also mind on those planets. And so right now, the human race has evolved. They gotten better. They gotten stronger thanks to machines being alongside with them. But of course, for Steve Rogers, he's kind of like, listen, Franklin, if it's you, if it's really you, then you know how I can stop your father and Tony Stark. And so that means you and I need to have a conversation because I want to know how to stop them. And of course, you have Franklin say, yes, I know that. Because you want to stop the death of the multiverse. You want to save our Earth. But at the same time, you want to do it the right way. But to do it the right way, you got to stop my father and his friends first. So you want me to basically tell you, how is that even possible? And to Steve Rogers, he's kind of like, yes, tell me how I can stop your father and Tony Stark as well. Now, you do have Franklin Richards basically tell Steve Rogers that they are going to fail. The Illuminati and him, both sides are going to fail. And the reason why both sides are going to fail is because for the Illuminati, they don't realize their goal is impossible to achieve. You can't save the multiverse. But on top of that right there are other people out in the multiverse trying to make sure the multiverse does die. The Black Priests, the map makers. And so it's Franklin saying they're going to run into enemies who are too strong for them to stop. And they're going to lose to them. And so again, their goal is too hard for them to achieve. And finally, they're going to fail because of you, Steve Rogers. They're going to fail because of you, Steve. Because you cannot let it go about what they're doing, but how they're doing it. And so you will try your best to fight against them, to stop them, to capture them. But that's the biggest problem right there. And that is the biggest reason why they're going to fail. And that is why you are going to fail as well, because your mind is to go after them first and not try to help and fix the multiverse. And so that is why both sides are going to fail. And that is what Franklin is trying to get in the mind of Steve Rogers. But before Steve Rogers is actually able to ask more questions to Franklin Richards, well, that is the moment the Time Stone reappears once again. And when it does, bam, it takes Steve Rogers, Black Widow, and Starbrand even farther into the future. And that is the moment you have Franklin Richards talk to that tree that the Avengers had arrived next to at this point in time. And that tree is actually Groot. But either way, it's Franklin asking Groot, do you think Steve Rogers had actually listened to me? Do you think he actually understood what I was trying to preach to him? And you have Groot basically say, no, he did not. Groot says no, that Steve Rogers is still going to do what he wants to do. Now, I'm going to run through this very quickly because to me, the 5th chapter is just okay, but not as cool as the others. But Captain America arrives in the year 51,028 by himself. Black Widow and Starbrand were sent back in the past, but he finds a gigantic metal structure in front of him. Once he goes inside, the computer core tells him to place his hands on the panel in front of him, so it can identify him. As soon as his hands makes contact, red things start wrapping around him as the computer lists out basic facts of who he is. It begins to say that Steve Rogers is way out of his league making it this far, explaining that in this time period a fragment of Ultron survived and evolved to create this world core. It created constructs of the Avengers, but then begins to explain that his consciousness will be uploaded from his body and scrubbed so that it can examine his body, because the World Core was able to detect some kind of bomb in the eye of Steve Rogers. And remember, that was placed in him when the Avengers had jumped 50,000 years into the future. But of course, Steve Rogers kind of like, no, you will not do anything to me, so I will fight my way out of here. Now, you do have the World Core basically explain that it has been studying time travel for a while. But with that being said, it did tell Steve Rogers that it did send some things back in the past by 1 year, but those things never came back. Now, you did have the World Core explain to Steve Rogers that apparently at the same time Steve Rogers had arrived at this point in time, some other AIs had appeared as well. And those other AIs were very suicidal and they were trying to kill off the World Core. And so the World Core thought that apparently Steve Rogers must have been working with those AIs. But of course, they were not. Now, the bomb that was put in the eye of Steve Rogers, it pops out. Remember, that bomb was put in his eye when the Avengers stopped at a previous moment in time, where the Avengers at that time were more machine than human. Matter of fact, they were just machines. But either way, that bomb does pop out of the eye of Steve Rogers. And of course, that bomb is able to kill off the World Core. Just like that. It is all gone. And it's kind of like, okay, that is weird, but the Time Stone does reappear once again to take Steve Rogers possibly even farther in the future, or maybe back to the present day. And so you do have Steve Rogers right now standing in temporal space where it seems like he's about to finally go home. And he does fall where it seems like he's about to go home. But that is the moment he saved at the very last minute by Iron Lad. And we have not seen Iron Lad in a very, very long time. Now, I will explain who Iron Lad is here in a moment. But before I do that, I want to explain what Iron Lad is trying to show Steve Rogers, which is that at this point in time, it's better known as the end of time. There is no more Avengers except one, and that one is Iron Lad. But you do have Iron Lad point out something very important, and he says that with Steve Rogers and the Avengers in the past, they basically started something way in the past, which is the Avengers, meaning that the Avengers will always be around. Think it through. Every single point in time that you have stopped in, there was some version of the Avengers, and all of those were just different versions of you guys, but it's them saying that no matter what happens, the Avengers will always be around. Humans are machines. there will be some kind of humans around. But either way, though, you do have Iron Lad say that he is the last Avenger. And you have him say, yes, I'm the last one. But not just me. It's me and my other cells. And that is the moment you have Iron Lad show Steve Rogers at this point in time, it's not just him, but it's also Kang the Conqueror and Immortus as well. Now, when it comes to Kang the Conqueror, Iron Lad, and also Immortus, they are the same three characters. What I mean is that originally in Marvel Comics, you only had Kang the Conqueror, a random villain from the future who is trying to make sure that his future does happen, where he is actually the one ruling in that future. But the problem is, though, with Kang the Conqueror, he has traveled so much throughout time that there are many different versions of him because he time travels so much. And that is where Iron Lad comes in. Iron Lad is a teenage version of Kang the Conqueror that learned that in his future, he becomes a bad guy. And so the teenage version of Kang the Conqueror basically went on his own path and became Iron Lad. And so that is why you have Kang the Conqueror and Iron Lad. But then another version of Kang the Conqueror also broke away, and that version became Immortus, the ruler of the end of time. And so that is why you have three different versions of Kang the Conqueror, because Kang the Conqueror has time traveled so much, there are so many different versions of him throughout time. Now, with that being said, you didn't have Iron Lad, Kang the Conqueror, and Immortus do something crazy, which is they were able to actually capture the Time Stone. By putting the Time Stone in the cage where there is no time at all, the Time Stone is finally stuck. But then you have Kang the Conqueror, Immortus, and Iron Lad want to explain something very important to Steve Rogers. Now, you do have Iron Lad explain to Steve Rogers that Steve Rogers already know what's happening right now in the past. The multiverse is dying. The multiverse is dying way too early. It should not be dying this early at all. But with that being said, it's Iron Lad trying to tell Steve Rogers, listen, the multiverse was meant to die one day, but it was not meant to die this soon. And so we have been studying what is killing off the multiverse. Now, with that being said, you then have Kang the Conqueror come in and say, we have been in a time loop, meaning that Steve Rogers, this is not your first time being here at the end of time talking to us about how to save the multiverse, because apparently they have tried so many different things, but nothing works. The multiverse still dies, and that is a big problem. And apparently the last time they sent Steve Rogers back in the past after he made it this point in time, they sent Steve Rogers back in the past to talk to Tony, for Tony and the Illuminati to find better solutions that do not involve killing people at all. But of course, that did not work because Steve Rogers here once again at this point in time. And so you have Kang the Conqueror say, we have tried so many different ways to hopefully save the multiverse. But again and again, you appear in front of us with the Time Stone to tell us that we failed to save the collapse of the multiverse. And we have no idea what to do. And so this time, we think the best solution is to keep you here. If we keep you here, maybe the multiverse won't die. Maybe the time loop will finally break, and maybe we finally win. But of course, Steve Rogers does not like that idea at all. And that is the moment you have Steve Rogers actually try to fight against Kang the Conqueror, Immortus, and also Iron Lad. Now, this fight is not one of those big epic fights that go out for a few pages. Instead, it's really more of him taking his shield and breaking the Time Stone free. Because with the Time Stone finally being free, that means Steve Rogers can grab the Time Stone and go back in time. The problem is, though, that means the time loop continues. And so right now, Iron Lad, Kang the Conqueror, and Immortus, they have to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time, Steve Rogers could most likely break the time loop to finally save the day, to finally end all this madness. But it comes down to him going back in the past to hopefully break the time loop. But to go ahead and wrap up this video, we do see Steve Rogers making it back to the present day, where of course he is confronted by all his Avengers friends. The one he brought originally at the very beginning of this video when he went to go confront Tony Stark about what Tony Stark and the Illuminati was doing. But either way, you do have Black Widow ask, what is next? And you have Steve Rogers say, we are going to hunt down our friends, because our friends are going around basically blowing up planets, killing people, and we can't have that. And so now we are going to go after them and basically capture them. And so this will begin a war between the Avengers and the Illuminati. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoyed today's comic book video. Later, guys.